With the roll call. Start with roll call.
Good evening, McCoy.
Here. Here.
Warren.
Here. Okay, we're open for any public participation. Okay, we can move on. Thank you. We have 3 discussion items. The first one is the discussion to talk about the student dress code, discussion of plan for 2021-2022 school year to evaluate and bring forth potential revisions to policy for 43.1 student dress.
So we've been doing this policy for a few years now. We revised the policy with a sunset date for language regarding student head coverings about 2 or 3 years ago, and with the sunset after a year. And then we hit COVID, and so we extended it another year. And then we decided that we would bring it back again this year and hopefully get some final resolution to the policy. At the last board meeting discussion, and I'm not sure, Laura, if you were on the board when it came back that time, there was some request that we get community and stakeholder input, and then use that input to then provide information to the board as to what to do with the language, particularly with respect to the head coverings, the hats and the hoodies and the do-rags. So wanting a discussion tonight as to what you want that to look at like. I'm going to guess that it's going to take a number of departments here in the district office to pull that together and to give us some time to get that feedback on top of everything else that's going on. And then hopefully be able to have a final plan and recommendations to bring to the board before the end of this school year in anticipation of the 22-23 school year.
One of the things that was shared with me by Melissa was the results of the survey that was done, and I think it was fall of 2019. And I mean, overwhelmingly, it looked like there was not a lot of support, but I know that, I believe at the last discussion for the board, they looked at digging a little deeper into that. I just was curious if you guys had any thoughts of how you'd like to pursue that and getting more input as we move forward.
Not a lot of support in what, and for the policy as it had been made, that we would have to have further change.
Correct, that there was not a lot of support for the head, like wearing hoodies and hats, things like that. But I know there was a lot of reasons why that was being looked at, and if we wanted to dig into that a little bit further.
The survey we did was before we passed the policy. So it was input on what could become the policy. And I know as it's currently written, it comes back to the building administrator. And so I'm wondering if, you know, I don't necessarily need a survey, but I think it would be really interesting to get some, to have some conversations with all the principals, whether that's as a big group or, you know, smaller groups or however that's done. Because I'd like to understand if they're opposed to, so in other words, if we were to take B, it's under 3B, that first one, and just make it say headwear, including hats, hoods, and bandanas may be permitted in school districts to the period, and cross off the building administrator. I know there were building administrators very much in favor of this policy, and there were building administrators vehemently opposed to it. I'd like to get a better understanding of what the opposition is, as opposed to just hearing that they're unhappy that, you know, they don't want their students wearing hats and hoods in schools. And I don't know, yeah, so that, I guess that's, it was pretty clear from the survey that, you know, at least the teachers, the staff that filled it out, and we had a lot of feedback. It was pretty clear that they were opposed, and they give pretty clear explanations of why. But, and so I feel like I understand, at least from 2 years ago, their opinions, but I never got to the point where I really got to understand the hesitation of the administrators. That's not to say I would be opposed to doing another teacher survey, but, you know, if the general consensus is the opinions are the same, then I'm not sure it's worth repeating that same survey.
I'm wondering if the survey is not, what are your views on this, but rather, how has this impacted your school, given that we're now a few years in here? And certainly we know opinions, the needle probably has not changed too much on just the general view of the head coverings, but is it worth understanding what the impact, now that we're a few years into this, has been on educational delivery, on behavior, that those sorts of things that have occurred in the school, and is that the focus of the questions and hearing from students?
And I think it would need to be made very clear which, if we survey the staff, whether they're in a building where the administrators have said no hats and hoods, or if they're in a building that they have allowed hats and hoods. And I don't know what the percentage of that is. I haven't. That would be interesting to know too.
I think at the time there was some concern by administrators and within buildings as to having some uniformity as well. I know that was a big issue. Like some teachers go to various schools, and I don't know, that was an issue at the time.
And I'm assuming that that this still is the sticking point, that the rest of the dress code we haven't had any negative feedback about that, or is that, should we also, because we made a significant change in, I forget where it is, but in student dress, you know, and loosened the dress code. I think it affected our girls more than our boys, but you know, I guess I'd be curious at least to know, are there any issues with that, or has that been a non-issue?
So maybe a general question, just overall, other than the hats and hoods, has the other changes to the policy, positive, negative, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Yeah, I would like to know if taking out all that gendered language has produced what we'd hoped for.
Any other thoughts on that? I will work with Lori and some of the other departments here to get something put together, and I can bring it back probably October, November-ish time for you guys to look at, to see if that would be a good plan.
And then did you say this would come to the whole board in the spring, or would it come in January or February?
So we'd start here with the changes and then bring those changes to the board for approval before the end of the school year, because we're gonna have to put the changes in the student expectation book.
Okay, so it would be probably late winter, early spring. Yeah, okay.
Does that timeline work?
Are we looking, or could we look at doing, I know we're looking at more changes related to the virus as we're moving forward and things are going back to virtual, but as it is an option to do focus groups or that type of, or something other than a survey, maybe to delve a little bit deeper into the concerns about the changes to the dress code, or maybe that could be an option after, if we do gather more data, to, if we needed, we could dig in a little more with administrators or students or something to understand if there's some strong feelings about it. I'd like to have that as an option if possible.
I'd offer we could certainly do that, because we've become pretty adept at doing that remotely. So regardless of where we're at in that process, we'd have the ability to convene remotely. We meet regularly with the building administrators, so it'd be very simple for us to do it with them as part of their regular meeting process. We'd like to engage the students. We could work with the student leadership groups at the high schools in particular to get some feedback from them.
We had very vigorous and interesting conversations with the ICSE students in our meetings during that time. They were full of opinions and good, very, very good feedback.
I just want to mention, we did survey parents the last time as well, and I would be remiss if we would not include them as part of the conversation as well.
And sorry,
I know Lori has started a parent group as well, and maybe this is something that maybe Lori's group could potentially work on as well. Okay,
'cause we didn't formally survey students, right? We just had the ICSC bring their feedback back, or I can't remember.
you're correct. We did the ICSE.
I mean, I think like Laura said, they gave us really good feedback and perspectives and things like that, but they don't necessarily represent I mean, they do represent their entire student body, but they don't necessarily know all of the different perspectives that might be out there with the students.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion points for this policy? Okay, we can move on to the internet filtering, discussion item B, review of proposed policy 363.5, internet filtering. Okay. And Josh is here, and Josh brought forward a request for this policy. So as you probably know, we are required to have a filter on our internet in order to be eligible for E-rate and under the Children's Internet Protection Act. As a byproduct of that filter, though, we filter out a lot of stuff and some things that does not necessarily have to be filtered out by the law. Up until this point, we have not had a really good system for teachers or students to say, hey, I'm doing a research project on this, and I would really like to be able to have access to this website. We've had the request come forward, but we haven't really had a system to evaluate, make those changes, and then track those changes, and then provide really a structure for the individuals who are making those decisions. So Josh's team brought forward this concern. They were really great in coming up with ideas as to how to put that system in place, and that's the policy that you see in front of you tonight.
I thought the policy was good, and I don't have any specific feedback, but I did wonder if you had conversation about whether there should be parent representation on the technology committee. I guess I'd like that to be, turn around and my microphone won't work. I guess I would be interested in hearing the pros or cons of having a parent representation on that committee. I don't know, I know Andrew likes to have students on every committee, but I think it's important to have student representation, but not just for the pure sake of having a student on a committee. And I'm not thinking that this is necessarily something that would be a good use of student time. But I could be convinced otherwise if you both think differently.
I don't see a downside to having students and parents represented in some way. I guess that's about as far as I can go on that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I can see the benefit of having a student, especially if this is a career area of interest, something to help build their resume as they're moving forward. Sometimes people don't have a lot of opportunities to really explore what they may be interested in. So I can see that as a good way for development of a student that may be really interested in this possible career path, or to explore it or rule it out, but that may be a good opportunity. And for parents, somebody may be able to bring some good input from a parent's perspective for maybe what they do at their organization or just their experience. But I thought this was a really good policy, and I think we've all had experiences as with employers where you go to a site that you may need and you can't get in. So you can just imagine how frustrating that is for students. So I thought this was really well laid out on how that could work for someone that needs to get access to something that's appropriate.
Okay, I will work with Josh and his team to change section, looks like section 3B with respect to the technology committee to include a parent representative and a student representative. Any other changes? Okay.
Thank you. Now move on to discussion item C, review of proposed revision to policy series 600 and 900.
Laura, can we do the 900 first because Mike Stengel's here and then he can go home to take the next meeting virtually?
Oh, sorry. Absolutely.
All right. So we, as you know, that we have, best practice is to review the policy series on a scheduled basis, and we are starting that work. I'm very proud of this work. We started with 2 of the series that needed a lot of work, and there were a lot of people involved. I want to thank my team, Ellen and Heather. I want to thank Angie Robley, Jake Elverson, Josh Patchek, Pete Ross, before he retired, did a lot of work on this, and Mike Stengel as well has done a lot of work on this. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody that has been on those really exciting meetings that we've done to talk about really, really exciting policies. So, and I think we started with the driest of the policies. We could have probably, and that's probably why they needed the review, because they've been the less exciting ones to review. So the first policy series we reviewed is the 900 series, and the 900 series largely deals with our facilities and that end of the operations department. And the good news is that while it doesn't look like we have a lot of policies in that series, there aren't a lot of policies in the WASB model policy series. In the district, we've adopted WASB model policies as sort of the template for policies, and then we revise those and look at best practices and look at other districts and then modify policies that we bring forward and adopt them to fit for Green Bay. So the 900 series, there aren't a lot of model policies, and the ones that we do have, we have some policies that other districts don't, because just the size of the district and our needs of the district, we have those. The policy that we are proposing though for revisions is actually to repeal policy 930, is it 932? Yes, 932, selection of architects and engineers. In the 600 series policies, we had to revise a lot of those to follow the uniform grant guidance a number of years ago. And when we did that, that set up the parameters for requests for proposals, bids. And so this policy really became obsolete because a number of those provisions in policy 932 and rule 932 are included in the purchasing policies. So if anyone has any questions on that.
Makes sense. Sorry, makes sense. That would leave us with, I'm looking at our policies on board docs. Then we just have one policy under the 900 series, the naming of district facilities. Yeah, I'm not seeing any more in the.
You're correct.
So they are, I mean, at one point we didn't have them all posted and stuff like that, but they're all up here. Okay.
All of the policies that are current are in the on board docs.
So it just seems to me that if you have a whole category and it has one policy that is, I mean, is that a requirement that we have 900 series for facilities development? Or can we roll that into fiscal management, for instance, with 600 policies?
I personally, and Mike can weigh in on this too, I would recommend you keep, essentially, I refer to these really as chapters of the book. So you have your book of policies and these are the chapters, because there may come a time where you need other policies regarding facilities development. You want to add those to that chapter. In addition to that, this is really the structure of how WASB has those model policies set up. And it makes sense, especially when you go from district to district to district and see how those policies work. You know where to look for those policies.
And I'd also add that when they do updates to the policies, they push those out to us, and then this would be aligned with their policy numbering, which makes it easy for us to make sure that we're not missing anything when it comes through on those updates.
When you, when you say updates, you're referring to WASB, right? Okay.
Okay, so if there's no questions on the 900 repeal, then we can go on to the 600s. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for all your work. Okay, we have Angie joining us virtually, and Angie and Josh did a lot of work on this. Ellen did too. I can't even begin to explain how much work this has been for everybody involved. So we included all of the changes to all of the policies. I identified 3 on this sheet that we're gonna have to bring forward in September because they were gonna take a little bit more work, and I wasn't sure we were gonna get through all of these anyways tonight, so we saved a little bit of fun for the September meeting. So we can go through it policy by policy, or if you've reviewed them and we have questions, how would you like to handle it?
What would you prefer? Would it be better just to go through it individually to make sure we cover everything? I don't need a lot of, you know, then it would also be, I mean, there's a lot of them. So I don't know, whatever works best for you, Melissa, to get your needs met here with what you need from us.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of questions or
Yeah.
suggested edits or anything, so however you think is best, I'm in agreement with Laura.
I did get a chance to go through and there wasn't anything that I had that stuck out to me, but if it would be beneficial to go through each one quickly, we can, whatever, agreed, whatever would work best. For the- Yep,
Name them and then they'd be on the recording if anyone was gonna listen.
Does that work for you, Angie, too?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, the first policy that we are bringing forward is, it's proposed, they all say proposed, I'm sorry. So policy 620 is the annual operating budget policy. And this policy does exist. It was last revised in 2017. Angie, do you have anything to offer on the changes on this one?
No,
Okay. Any questions from the board?
In general, when we look at these, if it's a policy that already has been approved, is it just the red that's been changed then?
Correct. We gave you just the track changes and just the red has been changed.
Because there's a few of these that are new. Okay, and so that's, the whole thing is brand new. Okay. Just wanted to make sure I was reading these correctly.
And I'm pausing because mine's in black and white and the red is not showing up very well on here. So just let me pull up the electronic version.
for this in red, we striked out the fiscal management goals, financial reports, statements and audits for cross references.
Correct. We cleaned up the cross references. Thanks. There are a number of these. That's what we really did, was clean up the cross references.
yeah, there wasn't too many that were brand new policies. And to Melissa's point, we brought these forward when we had to go through the uniform grant guidance. A lot of these 600 series, so that was just a few years ago. So a lot of these are just, we just cleaned them up.
All right, so the next is 623 budget implementation, and the changes are just the cleanup of those cross references as well. And then we are proposing to repeal Exhibit 631.1, continuing disclosure annual review checklist. Angie, do you want to weigh in on why we're proposing to repeal this exhibit?
Which one is that? These are not in
Exhibit-
order. Sorry.
Yeah, I know they're not in order on here. 631.1. I think they're reverse order, it looks like.
631.1. For some reason, I don't see it.
I'm not seeing that one in the attachments.
It's just on our, that overview, the considerations document, it's just listed as to be repealed.
Oh.
but yeah, I don't have an attachment for it.
I apologize. If you go into the policy and then it's listed in the policy series under the 631.1 exhibit. Do you see it, Angie, on the
Yep,
policies?
I got it. Yes. So, right, so this was a process that we weren't doing. So that's why we don't need to do it. It's not required. So we decided to just repeal this one and get it out of our policies because we don't have to follow it.
Okay, that brings us to 640 rule procedures for federal program grant applications and proposals. We also worked with Amy Fish as well, who oversees some of our grants, to bring forward some revisions to this rule with respect to the application process and who is involved in oversight of that process. Okay, no questions on that one? And then policy 657, grants from private sources. Again, we worked with Amy Fish and Angie on that as well, with respect to changes that we would need regarding our grants from private sources, not from federal funds. Okay, next is 657 rule, same as with the policy, worked with the same people and really tried to streamline that and bring about greater clarity in the rule. Any questions on that one? Student fees, we are bringing in September. That's okay. Okay, next is policy 662.3 fund balance. Just some minor changes in that policy as well to reflect our current practices.
For people who are listening, who might listen to this at another time, the whole thing about cleaning up cross references, that all refers to the other policies at the bottom of the policy that would have some overlap. Is that how, I don't know if there's a better way to describe that.
I think that's a great way to describe it.
A lot of our policies do have that component to them. And just if anyone was wondering what that actually meant about cleaning up cross references.
Okay, so next policy is 664 cash in school buildings, and that again was just cleaning up of the cross references. And we had included, for some reason before I got here, they had included some cross references for policies that could be adopted by the board. They may not be on the books, and so we've eliminated the policies that we don't have, and then policies that had changes to names. For example, on this one, 656 student fees, it was previously named student fees, fines, and charges. So we just cleaned up the actual name of the policy. Okay, next is policy 665, fraud prevention and reporting. And this is a new policy being brought forward. Angie, do you want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, this was one of them that was strongly recommended to have something in writing, and as a policy, it is pretty straightforward as to what we would do anyways if we discovered fraud in our office, or what the protocol would be if something was uncovered or fraudulent. So this policy, like I said, is pretty straightforward, pretty what you would see anywhere else. It made sense to put this into place, and it's good to have in policy.
Any questions on that one? All right, next is policy and rule 672, procurement and purchasing in the procurement requirements and methods rule. This was the big policy that we had to bring forward in 2017 when the uniform grant guidance was established, and we needed to bring our policies into compliance based on our audit that we had at that time. So it was a big change here in the district and a lot was put in place. We've had some time now to see how that's working and to see how those changes have been reflected here in the work of particularly Angie's department. And so these changes really reflect just the implementation and tweaking to make it reflective of how we've done our work under that uniform grant guidance. Angie, anything else to add?
No, that covers it, Melissa.
Any questions on that one? Next, I told you it'd be really exciting. Next, we have 672.51, suspension and debarment of vendors and contractors. And this policy is new, I believe. Yes. Oh, no, it's not. This one we did have in place. So we are just cleaning up a few things to make it consistent with policy 672 with respect to those amounts that we're required to put out in the RFPs and the bids.
So you added the phrase greater than 25,000. Before this, there was no dollar value in that sentence. I'm looking at 2B. Yeah, okay. And what was the reason for choosing that particular number as opposed to 15?
Under the uniform grant guidance, we're required to go for bid for anything greater than 25,000. So it's just consistent with that.
Okay, thanks.
Next is policy 673, payment procedures. Cleaning up again of those cross references on that policy. And then we have any questions on that one? Okay. Policy 673.1, district issued credit cards. This is a new policy that we're bringing forward. Angie, do you want to offer why we're bringing this one forward?
Actually, Jake would have from procurement, he would have been the one that brought this one forward. I reviewed it. The district issued credit cards, this was also strongly recommended to have something, if we do have district issued credit cards, to have something in policy. So that's the reason why we wanted to bring this one forward, or why he wanted to bring this one forward. So it makes sense to me, straightforward.
I assume we had some sort of guidelines in the past that are similar to this. It's
Yeah.
just a recommendation to put it into policy instead of leaving it in guideline format.
That's right. Yes, that's right, Brenda. When an employee applies for a district P card, there's a handbook. I call it a pretty actually extensive handbook that goes through, the rules, the responsibility of the card holder, the things that you have to, the procedures and processes that you have to follow. So this is really just solidifying that and putting it into policy.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense.
I remember getting my handbook and just being afraid to even use my credit card. So, so then we also have the rule that accompanies the policy that just provides the implementation guidelines for that policy. And then we have policy 681, fiscal management and internal controls. And that's just a few revisions to reflect our current practices and then the cleaning up of those cross references. Anything on that one, Angie?
No.
Any questions? Okay, and then we have policy 683, management of capital assets. And this is a new policy that we're bringing forward. Angie, do you want to provide any rationale behind this one?
Let me just review this one. This was also, Jake worked on this one. So let me just. Yeah, I'm assuming same thing, Melissa, is that it was strongly recommended to have it in policy. We were already following, and this is just solidifying what we do with capital assets and management of them.
Okay, and then the last one is school properties disposal, policy 690. And these changes are cleaning up the cross references, and I believe that's all that's being changed on this? So we will bring the 3 other policies back to you in September. Those will have a little bit more in-depth changes than what we brought. I mean, this is a lot of cleanup, but those student activity funds and the student the payroll management safe harbor provisions, those taking a little bit more time just to get those changes to reflect our current practices. And then after we have done the review here in September, then we're ready to go forward to the board with the changes to the 600 and 900, and we'll have those 2 series done already. Our next 2 series to tackle are the 500 and the 700s is what's on the list.
I just want to thank you and all the various departments who go through this so methodically. These policies are really boring until you need them. And you sometimes do need them, and they need to be in place. They need to be up to date and in compliance. And I'm just really glad we have people who are making sure that happens.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And to echo Laura's sentiments, I agree. And I know these aren't the very exciting policies. I think some of the other ones coming up and looking at the dress code one, of course, there's going to be a lot of feelings surrounding those. And these are very important to have, but thank you for all of your work in updating these. It's a huge list, but we went through pretty quickly. So thank you for that. So then all we need is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.